Plotting on a ring. They say I should do the Lakers. Fuck that loyal shit. What if Reggie Miller just left the Pacers? Quote Damian Lillard from his Heaven or Hell freestyle that came out in April of 2023. 3 months later, requested trade from the Blazers. Wants to go specifically to a team that was in the finals last year. That leaves Blazers fans pondering our future, pondering our relationship with Damian Lillard and how that has changed. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's been a lot of our heroes for, 10 plus years at this point. And a lot of feelings have really changed pretty dramatically in these past few months. So what do you guys think? What's your current feeling about Damian Lillard and maybe those words in particular and his, the loyalty that he's really made a part of his personality and his career up until really the last few months? And do you think, is it justified? Is it, maybe he's shown enough loyalty and there comes a certain point where, he needs to look out for himself first, and that's a justifiable thing.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of nuance to this. We do have to think about the fact that the Blazers really never gave him that all-star teammate that a lot of the other top players have got to play with. Even teams like Minnesota made big swings for guys like Jimmy Butler. OKC made a big swing for a guy like Paul George, a guy who only wanted to go to LA at the time. So you can look at it like that and say, well, they never gave him that top-tier player. And whether that was because of Neil or whether that was just because we didn't swing, whatever it was, that is there. However, it rubs me, and listen, Dame is my guy. I've said this before. I'll just keep saying it just so people don't think I'm just a hater. I was there for both of his game-winning series, lucky, just random. I go to one playoff game a year. Was at both of those, okay? Dame's been a part of my best sports memories ever, and that probably won't ever change. But the guy signed a Supermax extension last season, fully knowing the state of the roster. We had just got done tanking, blatantly, for Shaedon, and we got Shaedon Sharpe, didn't trade the pick away. Dame re-signed a Supermax, specifically extension. What does he do the next offseason? Demands a trade, and not like most other superstars where they say, this is a list of teams I'll play for. He gives one team. It's the defending Eastern Conference champions. He still would get his Supermax money. So he's having his cake and eating it too. I don't like how the Supermax gave him the opportunity to make more money by staying with his team. And the very next offseason, he's trying to use that to get to still go to his team that he wants to play for and get his money. That rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, there's no way around the fact that I feel differently than I used to. The last few months have been rough for Blazers fans. We collectively have gone through the stages of grief. Literally, that's not an overstatement. Like, first, denial. Everyone was like, oh no, this has to be a misreport. Surely we can figure out a way to keep him on the team if we just figure out some way to pull an absolute magic trick with Scoot Henderson at the draft night. We can trade for some superstar player that'll keep Damian happy, which brings you into the anger and the bargaining and the depression. And finally, hopefully we can work our way toward acceptance. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not there yet. I'm not at acceptance. If anything, maybe I'm somewhere around depression. I find it just so sad and disappointing that I took the guy at his word for a long time because he seemed different. He seemed just different enough from what the NBA is turning into that I thought maybe he was really going to stay with the team regardless of whether we gave him an all-star player to go try to win a title, because it seemed like he didn't really care about chasing the ring. He put it in the lyrics that it wasn't about chasing the ring. He would rather be Reggie and stay and not win the ring than chase the ring and try to get it somewhere else. And I get that he wanted the opportunity to compete. I don't necessarily give him the out that he gave the Blazers every opportunity to try to put a winning team around him. I don't think that we were there yet. He knew when Olshey left, which was a disaster, that put the Blazers in a terrible position for at least a couple years running. He had to know at that point that it was like a 3-4 year plan. It wasn't a 1 year turnaround. It just wasn't feasible. We had to tank for at least 2 years, which we did. We drafted a ton of talent. And now we have to have the opportunity to go out onto the market and try to get a couple of pieces. And he just decided to nuke it instead. So I feel differently about him. I feel misled and like I can't trust him really, which is a bummer because I want him to keep coming to games into his 50s and 60s and 70s and be the Blazer forever. You know, he owns like a quarter of the state now. Like I want him to come back at some point, whether that's to put on a uniform or just to be part of the organization. But this will always put a little bit of a stain on the legacy for me.
Yeah, you mentioned Scoot Henderson and the young pieces that they've brought in and that, you know, attempt to kind of do a quick rebuild. And I will say probably therein lies the problem in that the young talent that they've drafted are, you know, all play his exact position. They all do what he does. They're kind of his replacements. And so I can understand from his point of view the loyalty that he's put in to this team and, you know, done all the right things, said all the right things. And then when he asked them to trade for, you know, a guy who has a super high ceiling that could be the franchise guy, but he's 19 years old, and he asked them to trade him for a guy that's not really worth that value, or trade him for a hypothetical package that's not worth, that no Blazers fan or very few Blazers fans would be satisfied with, and that the organization just can't bite the bullet on. It was a kind of an unwinnable situation, really, that the Blazers landed Scoot Henderson. I think that was the final nail in the coffin. You also mentioned Reggie, you know, as I did at the beginning. Reggie at least was competing into his 30s. He was making conference finals. He made an NBA finals, I believe. They were always there in the thick of it, even though they didn't win the ring. And that's been that has not been the case with the Blazers the last 3-4 years. They've been the exact opposite, trying to lose desperately so that they can get access to his replacement. So it's a tough situation. I can see why he'd want out. It's just a shame after all that he's said and all that he's done that it is coming to this, and it definitely leaves some mixed feelings. I still really don't know how I would feel seeing him in another team's uniform. I kind of tend to think that I'll probably root against them. CJ McCollum, when he got traded to the Pelicans, I immediately started rooting against him, and that might have been for some other reasons that we were hoping that the Pelicans would lose so that we'd get a pick, and that didn't end up happening. But since then too, I've kind of taken a weird delight in CJ's struggles with New Orleans, and sort of a like, I knew it. It wasn't just the Blazers, it was him, you know, that sort of a mentality. And I kind of have a weird sort of perverse kind of feeling about Dame too, that I kind of want to see him go struggle somewhere else. That's probably not a healthy mentality to have, but I don't know. I don't know if the grass is always greener on the other side. I kind of feel like that's what he's been saying his whole career, is that the grass is not always necessarily greener on the other side. And now he's peering over the fence, peering over the neighbor's fence into the yard, and it's South Beach, and there's parties down there, and there's great weather, and there's yacht parties and whatever else he's going to do with his hundreds of millions of dollars. And I don't know, maybe he'll have a great time down there. Maybe they'll come together quickly. Maybe they'll win a championship. But I I really don't know how I'm gonna feel about it as it happens.
3 things. So some of these are probably going to put me like the Blazer fans are going to say, what? I think some of the reason the Blazers could not put a team together is Dame's fault, kind of. I'll give some examples of why. So, who is the greatest GOAT in football? Who do you guys think is the most recent GOAT in football, right?
Brady.
Brady. What did Tom Brady himself famously do to help win? He took a little less money to help build the team around him. He did. Guess who else did that? Another big star that stayed with one team named Dirk Nowitzki.
Tim Duncan did too as well.
Tim Duncan did. Even Dwayne Wade when he was bringing in LeBron.
Wow.
He could have taken more. So
now that's a surprise.
Here we go. I mean, in the end, Dwayne wanted his money, right? So, I mean, he could have helped being able to bring another good player in if we weren't locked into the Supermax. Like, is the difference between an extra $30 million, but staying where you're at and staying that hero total over the length of a contract worth it over the other thing, which is leaving? And I mean, he still gets his money, right? But he could have helped the team been able to bring in a bit more solid supporting cast. I know he deserves the money. He's earned it. That's not what I'm saying. The other guys, Tim Duncan, Tom Brady, those examples, they earned their money too, but they wanted to win. And what'd they do? They helped the team out to bring in better team around them. So that's one thing. Another thing, you brought it up a little bit, Kirby. It takes 2 to tango for these trades. So a lot of people say, Joe Cronin promised Dame he was going to try to build a team around him. He did promise that, and he said it repeatedly he was going to take a swing. But what does a swing mean if it's a terrible pitch? You're not going to trade away the player for a terrible deal. You mentioned it. Was a Mikal Bridges a good player if we traded the 3rd pick for him? Yeah, he's a good player. Was he going to put us in contention? No, not at all. And the rumors were the Nets wanted more than the 3rd pick, more than Simons. That's just crazy to me. And I don't know. I think the trade for Dame crowd got into such a fever pitch, which I wanted Dame to get help too, but not at that price. You can't do it. So that's another aspect to this whole thing. The third thing, I think Dame chopped off our leverage with how he was talking and acting earlier in the summer. He basically said at the end of last season, I'm not doing this rebuild crap. And yeah, he has good reason to say that, but say that in private, not to where everybody in the league knows that you're going to be pissed if you don't trade the pick. That lowers the value of that pick. And what did he do earlier in the summer? What kind of things were happening in the buildup to this Miami thing before he demanded a trade? He's in a club. What song starts playing? Welcome to Miami. Oh, that was just a joke. 2 days later, he's demanding a trade. Was it just a joke, or were you just sending out the bat signal to Pat Riley to let, Gabe Vincent and Max Strus go? Like, that's the other side of this whole thing. Miami somehow, they just went to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Somehow, Miami let both Max Strus and Gabe Vincent go. They didn't keep either one of them. Did they maybe have word early that somebody wanted to go there and that's why they didn't keep both of them? I don't know. That's probably a conspiracy theory, but this whole thing kind of has just rubbed me the wrong way and how it's gone down. There's been ways to stop it before it gets to this point, and part of that is definitely on the Blazers. Definitely on Neil O'Shea, on Joe Cronin, on roster building. But part of it, in my opinion, is on Dame.
I also think that there's a real possibility that he's going to regret the way that this goes. And I know that might be part of, let's see, which stage, maybe bargaining or something along those lines. But there's definitely this hope, right, that it's going to blow up in his face. At least somewhere, even if we do take the tact of like wishing him well and sending him on his way, like somewhere deep down you hope that it doesn't work the way
those dark shadows are like, no.
That that id,
implodes.
the
Yeah.
id within there is not going to let it. But I think that there's a real chance that he ends up regretting this, because even financially, I mean, you talked about it, like the whole, he could have taken a little bit less money, to try to put a team together that could have tried to really compete. If you are able to compete like that, especially within your own hometown, and you build the team the way that Nowitzki and Duncan and Brady have, I mean, that definitely increases your value and your wealth. I mean, those guys definitely made way more money than they left on the table by becoming champions, because it just opens up so many more opportunities for, endorsements and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it definitely puts you on another level when you're a champion. So I think that was a mistake. I think that he was just thinking short term when he took the Supermax, knowing full well that he was going to give it like 6 more months and then demand a trade to a specific team. So I think there's a real chance that he ends up regretting his decision. I don't necessarily think that Dame to Miami makes them an automatic title contender. They kind of lucked into the contention this last year. They didn't look like it all season long. Then they really turned it on right toward the end of the year, and now they've lost a bunch of the pieces that made that happen. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I don't think it's going to be as easy as he thinks it's going to be.
Do you guys really think that if Dame would have taken a pay cut, the Blazers, would have won a championship? Is that all it would have taken, is a little bit of salary? The issue, it seems like, more with the Blazers is they haven't been able to attract any interest from any free agent or any trade. They haven't drafted very well, up until maybe the Shaedon Sharpe years. I guess Anthony was a decent draft pick, but again, pretty much plays the same position and exactly like Damian Lillard. So I don't really know if that's like, if you could go back in time and convince Damian Lillard to take a pay cut, they might have been able to add one more piece. But as you mentioned, just adding Mikal Bridges isn't going to take the Blazers, over the top to a championship. So I don't really know if he would have taken that pay cut and they got another piece or two, if that would have meant championship for him, because it is kind of an all-in sort of a proposition. Like, we're asking you to reduce your pay in order for future profits of being a champion. Guys like Duncan and Brady, it was much more assured, for them to take those pay cuts. They'd already won championships. They had very competitive teams. They were always in the mix. Blazers really don't fit that bill. So do you think they would have been able to if he would have taken that cut? Would that have been a good investment for Dame?
To be fair, it's easy for me to say giving up however many millions, right? If it's on the table, you'd want it. I get that. I'm also not saying they're going out here signing free agents specifically. But what it does is, let's give you an example. A couple of years when the Blazers were in the tax, they had to sign taxpayer mid-level exception players. Now, if Dame took a little bit less on his deal, would that have given the Blazers wiggle room enough to sign a full mid-level exception player, thereby improving the roster and getting depth and more tradable salary? Yes. Again, I think a massive issue in this was Neil. Neil really threw a wrench in everything when the draft of 2017, when he botched it and left with Zach Collins and Caleb Swanigan. Rest in peace, Caleb Swanigan. So that sucked. The free agency period where he paid Evan Turner, which, even though Evan Turner did help in the Western Conference Finals run, that was a big botch. Myers Leonard got a big contract.
Myers Leonard too, yeah.
So those things were definite ripple effects. That's what I'm saying. The Blazers definitely had a hand at this. I'm just saying there were ways where we could have been more competitive, and I think Dame had a hand in some of these things. Now, you're right. It's easy for me to say, and it's also not a guaranteed title where we're at. I'm just saying, when you got a guy with the Supermax system, which I think is very flawed, that makes that much of the cap, where do you get that money when you can't attract free agents? It has to be a trade. So maybe you could have had a more salary to work with in some of these unbalanced trades, where you're pretty limited into getting a certain percentage depending on where you're at with the cap. So yes, you're right. easy for me to say. And also, would it be a guaranteed title? No. I'm just saying the people that try to win where they're at, that's something that they've done in the past. So you're right. It wasn't a guaranteed title, but it's really hard when you're capped out to make big moves to get more talent when you're paying in the tax.
You're right that it at least would have been the team in all likelihood would have been more competitive. If not when it had championship hopes, they would have been more competitive. And at the end of the day, that's what he was asking for. To avoid a trade is a more competitive team. Although I guess he's now hoping that he can go to a place where he gets his money and is competitive, so kind of has his cake and eat it too. What do you think, Riley?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a real effect in the NBA where things can tend to kind of snowball for the better, right? So when you have an opportunity for a better mid-level player and then the team gets more competitive, then you have a better opportunity to attract free agents or to put together a more lucrative trade because you have assets that people actually want. And so I do think that any opportunity that you have as a player to try to make the team more competitive, if that's your goal to be competitive, you have to take it and just go all in. I mean, he was asking us to go all in on him, so it would have been nice to see him go all in on us. I'm glad he made a bunch of money. He entertained us for a lot of years. But yeah, it definitely still feels like a little bit of a stab in the back for him, honestly, to want to go to Miami and get all the money that he got for being loyal.
Yes. There was no hometown discount. Let's put it that way. There was
One
no
word
hometown discount. I mean, I know he didn't win a title, but he was putting out the vibes of I'm here no matter what. Let's get it done, So yes, he did a ton for the Blazers. He put the city on his back a lot. I'm not saying he didn't earn the money. My point is there was things he probably could have done that were detrimental, and not only the money, the contract situation, but I'm talking the lowering the value of this pick this offseason as well. I think that was a thing he contributed to.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about it. I feel like he didn't really do anything that wrong until he started doing things wrong. And then he did a lot of things that really kind of felt like he was screwing over the Blazers. And that all happened in the course of just this summer, basically. It's hard to really fault him too much for anything he's done before this summer. You could make the argument maybe he should have taken a cut on his salary, although I think that's arguable at best.
Right.
I don't really know if that would have done a lot for the team, but he really did. Once he decided to put his foot in the water, test out the Miami South Beach waters, he really went in, face first and kind of at the expense of his relationship with the team and the fans in Portland. There's probably going to be a lot of hard feelings out there. There's going to be some support for him too, I'm sure. But there's probably going to be a lot of hard feelings for a long time coming out of this. So, one word when you think of Damian Lillard, what's the one word that pops in your head?
Unfinished.
Sad.
That was going to be mine too. Sad. Maybe like a word. I can't think of a good word, but a word to describe a breakup. Maybe just breakup. Like how you
Abandoned.
feel. Yeah, how you feel after a breakup, kind of jealous and sad and resentful and like interested to see what the future holds, excited in some aspects. It's kind of like a whole snowball of different emotions. So hard to pick one, I suppose. But it was a fun game to try, I guess. What do you guys? What's for our fans watching? What's one word that comes to your mind when you think of Damian Lillard? Feel free to use more than just one word, though. It's a bit of a difficult task. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.